Alex Colt here again with the H.IX, this time with something a little quieter, a little more formal. Today I'm going to be doing a test showing off the differences between the H.IX in 1.45 and 1.47. It's not really a scientific test, it's more like a Top Gear test track run, where I'm just playing the aircraft and comparing some times for some benchmarks. The 1.45 version of the Horton is up first. So here's the game plan. I'm going to get off the ground, climb on a climb angle of 10 degrees to 1,000 meters. Then at 1,000 meters, I'm going to level off and accelerate to 500 kilometers per hour. I'm going to mark the video at 4 points. The point my throttle hits 100%, the point all 3 of my wheels leave the ground, the point I reach 1,000 meters, and the point I reach 500 kilometers per hour. The throttle up is going to be my 0 point, and you'll be able to see the timestamps and the distance from that 0 point displayed in the top left of the screen underneath my HUD. And that'll be our benchmark for this test. They made a lot of changes to the H.IX. She's a fundamentally different aircraft now. Let's see just how different she is. I'm going for the throttle up now. One of the big things they changed was they moved the center of gravity back from the nose wheel closer to the center of the plane. What that does is it really helps with things like takeoff stability. And you're going to see what I'm talking about when I try and take this plane off here. As I get up to speed, the tail of the aircraft starts to lift, and the aircraft starts dragging along on its nose gear. With all of the weight on the nose, it's a tentative balance between keeping it stable and crashing into the ground and going into a spin and being on fire and likely dead. But yeah, that's generally what you get with the H.IX currently on the live server. Especially with takeoffs and landings, it's squirrely, it's difficult, and it just doesn't want to respond to your controls. Another major thing that they changed was the engines. Currently in 1.45, the H.IX has BMW 003s. These are the engines that the aircraft was originally designed for during the prototype phase. They had a maximum output of about 1,750 pounds of thrust. They were also more reliable than the 004s, but they left it a little underpowered. The V3 was actually designed to fit later versions of the Junkers Jumo 004. But they weren't ready during testing, and they were barely out of the prototype phase by the time the war actually ended. The new engines produce over 2,300 pounds of thrust. This gives the plane what it desperately needs: the hard thrust and acceleration to be competitive as a jet. Coming up to about 2 minutes in, we're about at our altitude. The takeoff roll was 36 seconds long, and coming up here at about 2 minutes and 3 seconds, we've hit our final altitude, and I'm getting the plane leveled on the 0. Now for the acceleration, where this plane really struggles. In-game, the 229 has a thrust-to-weight ratio of about 0.23. This is actually very low, and you can see its acceleration here is kind of anemic. It takes it a while to respond to that thrust. Coming up at about the 2.5 minute mark, there we go. That's our last mark. At 2 minutes and 31 seconds, we were finally able to get up to 500 kilometers per hour. So, this is going to be our benchmark for when we test the new flight model in 1.47 coming up next. Alright, here we are on the dev server, and look at that cockpit. Oh man. That's just sexy. Leave it to Gaijin to just add something, a nice little touch, something that's cool. It doesn't really make the plane any better, it just makes, playing around a little fun. Alright, enough playing with the cockpit. We got work to do. Flight models don't test themselves. See, one of the things about doing audio in post is you get to watch yourself play around in the past. It's a really weird sensation. Alright, let's get a move on here. What you're going to see, almost right away, is the major difference in the stability of this aircraft. What they did when they messed with the center of gravity is they fixed a lot of the problems that make the plane almost unflyable in realistic and simulator battles. If you have to land, you're screwed. And there it is. They also cut 10 seconds off of the takeoff run, and it just lifts off perfectly smooth. Alright, I'm on my climb angle now. Let's see how she handles. The new engines, the 004Ds, fitting them on this plane, even though it wasn't designed to fit these specific engines per se, isn't really that much of a stretch. The Jumo 004Ds were meant to replace all of the previous models of the Jumo 004. This includes the 262, as well as the Horton and possibly even the H.IX. There was a proposed upgrade for the H.IX to fit these engines, and that would have made the airframe heavier and a little more sluggish, but that's a nearly 25% increase in thrust output. Here you can see the difference in thrust between the old engines and the new engines. I'm actually getting over 400 kilometers per hour in the climb, fairly easily as well. Something else to note is the velocity vector is further down from the pointing vector on the new flight model. This makes me suspect that they actually reduced the efficiency of the wing to keep the climb rate roughly the same. And that confirms my suspension right there. Despite the 10 seconds we lost off the takeoff run, in total time we're still only down 10 seconds. Until we hit the 500 kilometer per hour mark. She hits that acceleration mark a lot faster. Minus 35 is nothing to sneeze at. So, that's the new flight model. Just to play around a little bit, let's try some landings. Alright, here we are in final approach. Gears down, flaps coming down, speed's coming right down. And let's see what the stability changes actually do for this aircraft. I actually have to slow down quite a bit in order to get this thing to land properly. You have to actually land it with the nose pointing fairly high because that nose wheel is so tall. Here we go. Oh, wow. Yeah. I just stalled it out right above the runway, and it floated down like a leaf. That's actually quite impressive. It's very hard to get this plane to fly properly with a flight model. They couldn't even do it in IL-2 Stormravik way back. Now let's try that with a 1.45 flight model. So, I actually had to try this 3 times, and this is the best of my 3 attempts. It's really hard to land this plane properly on the current live server. With 1.45, you have to land it fairly quick, not like this. Let the speed drop too slow, and the nose wheel just bounced as soon as it hit. And it bounced again. Progressive stalling on the left wing pulls that down, and it just touches ground and snaps. So, I'm only marginally better landing the Horton 229 in 1.45 than I am landing a B-29 on an aircraft carrier. Let that sink in for a second.